What if I told you that a single kick, one violent, hateful kick, delivered in a courtroom meant to uphold justice, would expose the truth about racism in America more powerfully than any speech, any protest, or any law ever had? What if I told you that a man who had survived battlefields overseas, who had rescued American lives in total darkness, who had stitched broken skulls and shattered futures back together with miracles of medicine, was nearly destroyed not by an enemy, but by the very system he once risked his life to defend? Imagine standing there, handcuffed, helpless, your ribs cracking under the boot of an officer who sees your skin before he sees your humanity. Imagine feeling the air leave your lungs, not from the blow, but from the realization that in this place, you were never meant to be protected. That was Dr. Marcus Reed's reality, a hero in secret, a victim in public, a black man in America. And what happened after that violent kick, what happened in the minutes, hours, and days that followed, would unravel a police department, shake a courtroom, expose a web of buried misconduct, and force the Pentagon itself to step into a local case. This is not just a story. This is not just an incident. This is a mirror held up to America itself. So before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this must be told, if you believe the truth should never be buried, if you believe justice must be fought for, not assumed, hit that subscribe button for Racist Reality right now. Join a community that refuses to look away. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to witness will change the way you see this country forever. Let's begin. The moment justice failed, the first sound was the judge's gavel, a sharp wooden crack meant to restore order. But the second sound, the one no one in the courtroom would ever forget, was the heavy thud of Officer Cole Matthews' boot driving into Dr. Marcus Reed's ribs. The air changed. It thickened, warped, and folded into something suffocating. For a brief, horrifying second, it felt like the oxygen had been pulled from the room. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker, as though recoiling from the brutality they were forced to illuminate. And in the center of this suspended world, bent over from the force of the blow, was a man who did nothing to deserve it. Dr. Marcus Elijah Reed, age 39, neurosurgeon, husband, soon-to-be father, black man. He had walked into the Dallas County courtroom in handcuffs, wrists bruised from the night before. But he had walked in with dignity, quiet, controlled dignity. The kind of dignity that makes some people uneasy because it cannot be broken and therefore cannot be owned. But dignity, it turned out, didn't protect ribs from a boot. Not in this America, not in this room, not under this badge. Gasps broke out across the courtroom. A reporter dropped her pen. A young intern covered her mouth. A middle-aged man in the back row muttered, "Dear God," under his breath. But the one person who showed no shock at all was Officer Cole Matthews. He stood there breathing hard, fists clenched, jaw twitching, eyes narrowed with a hate so familiar it felt like part of the architecture of the nation. Something old inherited, passed down like a family heirloom, polished over time instead of worn away. "Order! Order!" Judge Linda Harper barked, slamming her gavel again, but her voice trembled. It was the trembling of a woman who had lost control of her courtroom the moment her law enforcement officer decided the law did not apply to him. Marcus lifted his head slowly. The movement hurt. God, it hurt. But he did it anyway. He wanted to see. He wanted to remember. He wanted the moment carved into his memory like all the others. The ones from the streets, the ones from checkpoints in foreign countries, the ones from operating rooms where seconds meant life or death. Pain for him was not new, but humiliation. Humiliation carried a different weight. His dark eyes locked onto Cole's, and for the briefest moment, something flickered there. Something like sadness, not for himself, for all the men before him who never got this far into the story, for all the men the world would never know, whose names would never trend, who would never have cameras pointed at the injustice done to them. He thought of his father. He thought of his childhood. He thought of the talk every black boy receives about police. How to speak, how to breathe, how to shrink, how to survive. Funny, Marcus thought. I survived war zones. But nothing prepared me for home. A soft, choked cry came from the gallery. Naomi, his wife, Dr. Naomi Reed, the woman who could thread a catheter through the narrowest arteries of a failing heart, the woman who kept others alive with skill and compassion, the woman who loved him with a fierceness that terrified him. She was crying. She had stood when the kick landed. Now her hand was over her mouth, her other hand gripping the bench so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes glistened with horror, rage, and a heartbreak that cut deeper than the boot ever could. She had watched him come home late from the hospital for years, exhausted but fulfilled. She had watched him choose restraint every time he was stopped for routine checks in neighborhoods he lived in, worked in, paid taxes in. She had watched him be twice as polite as anyone else, twice as patient, twice as calm, because black skin demanded it. She always feared something like this would happen, but she never imagined it would happen here, in a courtroom, in front of a judge, in front of the world, in front of her. "Bailiffs, restrain that man," Judge Harper shouted, pointing at Cole. But even her order hesitated. Not in confusion, no, in calculation, because punishing an officer in public was risky. It made institutions tremble. It made donors uncomfortable. It made headlines. Still, the bailiffs moved. But they did not rush. They did not leap. They approached Cole the way one might approach a co-worker who spilled coffee on the break room floor. Mild irritation, no urgency. Why hurry? Why react with the same speed they would if Marcus had been the one delivering the kick? And that perhaps was the quietest yet loudest injustice of all. Cole didn't fight. He didn't resist. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he stared down at Marcus with a twisted, triumphant smirk. Like he had proven something. Like he had made a point. Like this was all part of the script he had expected to follow from the very start. Marcus forced himself upright, pressing a hand to his ribs. He felt the bruise blooming beneath his skin. He felt his breath shorten. He felt the ache radiating, sharp and primal. But deeper, beneath skin, beneath muscle, beneath bone, he felt something else entirely. The familiar sting of being disbelieved. The familiar ache of being dehumanized. The familiar knowledge that no matter what he achieved, racism still saw him as disposable. Because no one in this courtroom knew the truth. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, not the officers, not the reporters. No one knew that Dr. Marcus Reed had once been Commander Marcus Reed of SEAL Team 6. No one knew that he had led missions so dangerous they remained classified even from congressional committees. No one knew he had saved men who would never know his name. No one knew he had nearly died in a country the United States wasn't even supposed to be operating in. No one knew because he never told them. He didn't want glory. He didn't want admiration. He wanted a quiet life. His wife, his unborn child, his patients, his home. But standing there, chest burning, wrists raw, dignity cracked but not shattered, he understood something. America only respects black men when they bleed for it, not when they simply live in it. "Dr. Reed," the judge finally said, her voice brittle, "did you do or say anything that provoked Officer Matthews?" The room gasped again, but this gasp was different. This was outrage. This was disbelief. This was horror wrapped in disappointment. Naomi stepped forward instinctively, not to cause a scene, but because the urge to defend her husband was stronger than breath itself. Alicia Gomez, Marcus's attorney, placed a firm but gentle hand on Naomi's arm, holding her back. "Your Honor," Alicia said sharply, "my client was handcuffed, unarmed, and standing silently when he was assaulted. The question should not be what he did to provoke the attack. The question should be, why did your courtroom allow it to happen?" The judge stiffened. Cole glared. Reporters scribbled furiously. And Marcus swallowed the pain, lifted his chin, and spoke. Not loudly, not defiantly, but with a quiet conviction that made everyone lean in. "Your Honor," he said softly, "I did nothing to provoke him. I simply spoke the truth. And for some men, the truth is a threat." Silence washed through the room again, except this time, it wasn't the shocked, suffocating silence of violence. It was the silence that comes right before history pivots. When the story reaches the threshold of change and everyone senses it even if they cannot yet name it. Outside, the morning sun pressed against the courthouse windows, filling the room with a brightness that felt almost symbolic. A light trying to seep into a place where shadows had been allowed to flourish for far too long. In that light, standing there bruised and bound, Marcus Reed looked less like a man defeated and more like a man rising. Not because he wanted to, but because injustice left him no other choice. This was not just his story anymore, not just his pain, not just his moment. This was America's moment, its reckoning, its reflection, its responsibility. Because in that courtroom, everyone was forced to confront a question the country had avoided for far too long. If a black neurosurgeon can be kicked in court by the very officer who lied to arrest him, what chance does an ordinary black man have? The night drive. The night before the assault in the courtroom had started like any other for Dr. Marcus Reed. Quiet, exhausted, but fulfilling in the way only saving a life can be. It was nearly 11:45 p.m. when he walked out of Dallas Mercy Medical Center, the automatic doors sliding closed behind him with a whisper of cold air from the overworked vents. The hospital campus was calm, too calm for a place that had taken in 6 gunshot victims earlier that day, delivered twins, repaired a ruptured aneurysm, and demanded from Marcus the kind of precision that leaves most surgeons trembling. But not him. Marcus had spent 14 straight hours inside an operating room, fighting for the life of a 10-year-old girl whose brain had been swelling so quickly that every second felt like a countdown. He had held her life quite literally between his fingers, navigating the microscopic battlefield beneath her skull, with a focus so complete it devoured everything else. Fatigue, hunger, emotion, fear. When he finally stepped into the night air, he was drained, but deeply, profoundly grateful. Grateful for her heartbeat, grateful for his team, grateful for the chance to go home to Naomi, to the quiet warmth of their house in Highland Park, to the baby girl growing inside her, whom they already called Grace. He inhaled slowly, savoring the cool breeze, letting it wash away the tension that always lingered after long surgeries. He just wanted to go home, sleep, hold his wife. Thank God for another day. He never made it that far. The road that should have been safe. Marcus got into his silver Tesla Model S, buckled his seatbelt, and began the familiar 18-minute drive home. The Dallas skyline blinked in the distance, lights shimmering like a constellation of man-made stars. His hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, precise even at rest, the way only a neurosurgeon's hands could be. As he drove, the weight of the surgery replayed in his mind. Not in a stressful way, but in the reflective rhythm that often followed intense operations. The girl's tiny face, her mother's trembling gratitude, the quiet beeping of machines as life slowly reclaimed her fragile body. These thoughts softened him. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing steadied, his heart was unclenched. But calmness, for a black man driving alone at night, is a fragile thing. It can vanish in an instant. And it did. Because as he turned onto the long, tree-lined stretch leading toward Highland Park, he saw them, blue and red lights, flashing, demanding, inevitable. Marcus's body tensed, not dramatically, but instinctively, in the way a man does when he has lived long enough to know that flashing lights do not represent safety for him. They represented danger, unpredictability, a familiar fear wearing a uniform. He looked down at his dashboard. He wasn't speeding. He hadn't missed a signal. His tail lights were perfectly functional. He knew because he checked them regularly, out of habit, out of necessity. But racism doesn't need a reason. It only needs an opportunity. He slowed, signaled, and pulled over to the curb exactly as his father had taught him years ago. Show your hands early, move slowly, speak softly, live. He rested both hands on the steering wheel, open, visible, non-threatening. Then he inhaled, then exhaled, then waited. The approach of violence. The patrol car door opened. Officer Cole Matthews stepped out, hand already resting on his holstered weapon. His face was drawn into a hardened scowl that Marcus had seen before. Not on him specifically, but on men like him. Men who were always just a few words away from deciding a black man was a threat. Cole approached the driver's side with a flashlight, angling it aggressively into Marcus's eyes. The beam was blinding, deliberate, dehumanizing. "License and registration," Cole barked before Marcus could even greet him. Marcus kept his voice steady, soft, respectful. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" Cole's jaw flexed. "Broken tail light." Marcus blinked once. He knew it wasn't true. Cole knew it wasn't true. But this was how the script began. "Of course," Marcus replied gently. "My wallet is in my back pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to move slowly." "Just get it," Cole snapped. Marcus nodded, moving with the kind of exaggerated care that felt humiliating and necessary at the same time. His wallet came out. The glove compartment opened. Paperwork retrieved. When Cole saw the name on the ID, Marcus Reed, MD, his face twitched. Success for some officers is seen as a provocation, especially when it belongs to a black man. "This is your car?" Cole asked, spit-laced skepticism dripping into the night air. "Yes, sir. I've owned it for 2 years." Cole shined his flashlight across the leather seats, the touch screen, the clean interior. "Pretty nice for someone like you," he muttered. "Someone like you," a phrase Marcus had heard too many times, a phrase that told him everything he needed to know. Marcus refused to let the words penetrate deeper than they deserved. "I'm a neurosurgeon," he explained gently. "I just finished surgery." Cole laughed sharply. "Right, and I'm the president." Marcus's chest tightened, not with fear. He had endured far worse overseas, but with resignation. This wouldn't go well. He knew that now. The lie that became a weapon. "Step out of the vehicle," Cole ordered abruptly. Marcus paused. "Am I being detained for a specific reason, officer?" Cole's eyes hardened. "That's it," he hissed. He reached for his radio like he'd been waiting for an excuse. "Dispatch, I need backup. Combative suspect refusing to comply." Marcus didn't speak. Anything he said would be twisted. Anything he resisted would be weaponized. 2 more patrol cars arrived within minutes. One of them held Officer Sophia Martinez, whose eyes flickered with discomfort the moment she saw Marcus. Calm, polite, non-threatening, handcuffed with unnecessary force. Marcus winced as the metal cut into his wrists, but he didn't protest. He had learned as a black man that pain must often be swallowed quietly to survive. By now, porch lights flicked on across the neighborhood. People stepped outside, curiosity drawing them into the unfolding injustice. One of them was Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, 70 years old, robe wrapped around her frail shoulders, phone held steady with the resolve of someone who had seen enough injustice in her lifetime to know that silence was complicity. She began recording. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Not again. Not another one." Cole rifled through Marcus's car. He moved quickly, agitated, frantic. Then it happened. The moment that would eventually change everything. He slipped something from his pocket, a small plastic bag, and tucked it under the driver's seat with a motion so rehearsing it was almost effortless. Marcus watched the reflection in the window. He didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't speak. He simply filed it away like a fact. A surgeon's mind, a soldier's memory, a black man's survival instinct. Cole pulled out the bag with theatrical flair. Well, look what we have here," he announced loudly. "Looks like the doc likes to get high." Officer Martinez's face fell. She had seen enough to know something was wrong. Marcus spoke for the first time since being handcuffed. "That's not mine," he said calmly. "And Mrs. Brooks across the street has video of what you just did." Cole stepped close. So close Marcus could feel the heat of his breath. "Shut your mouth, boy," he whispered. "Nobody's going to believe you." That word, boy, hit Marcus harder than the handcuffs. He had been called many things in war, many things in surgery, many things in life. But that word, that small, venomous word, was always meant to shrink him, to erase him, to reduce him, to remind him of the hierarchy someone like Cole clung to for power. Mrs. Brooks called out, voice cracking, "We're watching. We see what you're doing." Cole ignored her. Instead, he dragged Marcus toward the patrol car. "You're under arrest for possession and resisting," he announced loudly, as though reading lines from a play. Marcus caught Mrs. Brooks' eyes through the blur of red and blue flashing lights. She nodded, firm, steady, brave. She wanted him to know he was not alone. She saw him, and she captured everything. A lesson carried in silence. As they drove him away, Marcus's breaths grew shallow from the pain of the handcuffs, from the pressure in his ribs, from the humiliation pressing against his soul. He stared straight ahead, not at Cole, not at the bars, not at the blurred lights streaking across the window. He stared into the kind of silence only a man who has been injured in more ways than one can understand, because something in him hurt worse than the cuffs, worse than the bruises, worse than the planted evidence, worse than the insult. It was the realization that despite all he had achieved, despite the surgeries, the patients, the lives saved, despite the awards and respect of colleagues, despite the years risking his life for a country that now doubted he belonged, his skin alone was all it took to make him a suspect, a threat, a criminal in the wrong officer's eyes. And yet, even in that pain, he felt something else, a resolve, a calling, a truth every Black person in America understands. Your humanity may be denied, but it must never be surrendered. As the patrol car turned toward central booking, Marcus closed his eyes, not in fear, not in defeat, but in a quiet prayer that someday, somehow, this country would finally learn to love the people it so often tried to break. The system closes and the fluorescent lights of the Dallas Police Department's central booking facility buzzed above Marcus like a swarm of angry bees. The air smelled faintly of bleach and something metallic. Fear, maybe, or resignation. Hard to tell. Nearly everything in this place smelled like the erosion of dignity. They pulled him from the cruiser without ceremony, without care, without acknowledgement of the pain radiating from his ribs. Officer Cole Matthews walked behind him with a swagger that felt like a threat in motion, his presence heavy with the confidence of a man who had never, not once, been held accountable. Inside the building, the night felt thicker. A booking officer nodded at Cole, barely glancing at Marcus except to assess whether he was a problem. Not a man, not a doctor, not a husband, not an expectant father, just a body processed by the machine. Marcus stood on the marked footprints on the floor as they took his mugshot, harsh lighting illuminating every bruise, every line of exhaustion, every indignity carved across his face. A camera flash, another piece of the system taking ownership of him. He said nothing, not because he was weak, but because right now, silence was his strength. A fingerprint technician rolled his hands across the glass plate with the same indifferent pressure one might use while washing dishes. Marcus winced as pain shot down his forearms. His wrists were swelling from the tight cuffs, and that sharp, electric ache reminded him of something he had once told a junior surgeon. The body remembers its injuries long after they fade. He now understood that the soul does too. A captain's uneasy conscience. On the second floor of the building, Captain David Harris sat in his small office, staring at the arrest report that had landed on his desk minutes earlier. He had known Matthews for years, knew his reputation, knew the whispers, knew the pattern. A young Black man pulled over for nothing. A middle-aged Black professor was forced out of her car. A successful Black attorney detained without cause. Always the same neighborhoods, always the same officer. But every complaint, every red flag, every concern had somehow evaporated in the bureaucratic evaporation chamber known as internal review. Harris was a veteran of the department, 23 years in, a good cop who tried to believe that the system worked, even when it didn't, even when it broke, even when he watched it break people. He rubbed his temples as he read the narrative Cole had submitted. Combative driver, suspicious behavior, possible weapon, discovery of narcotics. None of it made sense. None of it matched what Harris knew of the wealthy, mostly white Highland Park area. None of it matched the calm, dignified man he saw on the station's intake cameras. Dr. Marcus Reed, neurosurgeon, calm even in captivity. And yet, Harris felt the weight of the unspoken rules. Protect the department. Protect the uniform. Protect your own. His phone rang. The display showed the name of Deputy Chief Leonard Price, A man with power, a man with connections, a man who expected obedience. Harris exhaled and answered. David, Price said, his voice slick with political tension, we've got a problem. I figured, Harris replied quietly. I'm reviewing the report now. The union wants us on record supporting Matthews. The mayor's office is uneasy. There's a saying that a community activist group already has video of the incident. Harris's stomach tightened. What kind of video? He asked. No idea, probably nothing. You know how these things get blown out of proportion. Price paused, voice dropping an octave. Make sure the paperwork is clean, David. We can't afford another scandal. Not in this climate. And if the review shows misconduct? Harris asked carefully. A silence heavy and telling. Just keep things under control, Price finally said. We need the narrative to stay intact. The line clicked off. Harris leaned back and looked at the ceiling, where a crack in the paint split like a fault line. For the first time in his career, he wondered whether the system he served still deserved his loyalty. The woman who refused to look away. Downstairs, the desk sergeant looked up as Mrs. Evelyn Brooks approached, her nephew by her side. She held her phone firmly, screen glowing with the video she'd recorded from her porch, evidence of Officer Matthews slipping a plastic bag under Marcus's seat. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried decades of memories. Sir, I have video of the arrest in Highland Park, she said. Video showing Officer Matthews planting that. Ma'am, if you have evidence, you need to fill out a witness statement. Leave your phone here for processing. I'm not leaving my phone, she said sharply. I've already backed up the video, but I want this included in the investigation. The sergeant's expression hardened. Are you refusing to cooperate with the police, ma'am? Her nephew stepped forward. She's giving you evidence of misconduct. If you're unwilling to document it properly, we'll take it to the FBI or the press. That sounds like a threat, the sergeant snapped. Evelyn leaned in, her voice calm and fierce. It's not a threat, son. It's a promise. The sergeant blinked. He wasn't used to grandmothers speaking like warriors. They filled out the form, left their information, but the sergeant never confirmed the video would be added to the file. Evelyn felt the familiar hollowness of injustice. Not new, not surprising, but still painful. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered, Lord, don't let them bury him. The surgeon in the holding cell. 8 hours passed before Marcus was permitted legal representation. He spent most of that time sitting in a cold concrete holding cell, his hands numb from swelling, his ribs throbbing, his jaw clenched, not with anger, but with the discipline of a man who'd been trained to survive. The cell was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional distant clang of metal doors. Time moved strangely, stretched thin, folding in on itself. He kept replaying the moment Cole whispered the boy into his ear. It didn't hurt because it was new. It hurt because it was old. Too old. Generationally old. He had fought warlords overseas. He had stared down insurgents in the dead of night. He had dragged wounded teammates from collapsed buildings. He had survived explosions, gunfire, and missions that should have killed him. But nothing in those years of combat taught him how to survive a system that saw him as a threat simply because of the skin he wore. That required a different kind of strength, a quieter one, a more painful one. The door opened. Dr. Reed, a woman's voice called. He looked up. A Latina woman in a dark suit stood there, briefcase in hand, her face composed but eyes burning with indignation. I'm Alicia Gomez, your attorney, she said. I've reviewed the charges, and frankly, they make no sense. Her voice was both gentle and sharp, the voice of someone who had fought too many battles for justice and still refused to surrender hope. Marcus nodded. Ms. Gomez, he said softly, I appreciate you coming. Alicia sat across from him, flipping open her legal pad. Dr. Reed, can you walk me through what happened? He did. Every detail, every motion, every word Cole uttered, every reflection he saw in the car window. As he described the moment the plastic bag appeared under the seat, Alicia's pen paused mid-stroke. And you're certain you saw it clearly? She asked. I'm certain, Marcus replied, and Mrs. Brooks recorded it. Alicia inhaled sharply. So there's video. Yes. And the police, she exhaled, did not mention this? Marcus shook his head. Alicia leaned back, jaw tightening. This is corruption, she said quietly. This isn't incompetence. This is calculated, and they expect the system to protect him. Marcus nodded once. I know. Alicia studied him. She noticed his steadiness, his restraint, his patience. Dr. Reed, she asked gently, why do you think you were targeted? He looked her in the eyes. No anger, no hatred, just truth. I was driving a nice car, he said, in a wealthy neighborhood, at night, while black. Alicia closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the weight of those words. When she opened them, she looked at him not just as a lawyer, but as a human being. We're going to fight this, she said. You are not alone. Marcus nodded, but inside he wondered, how many others didn't have a witness? How many others didn't have representation? How many others had been processed by the same machine and simply vanished into it? He wasn't fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for all of them. A system already choosing sides. What neither Marcus nor Alicia knew was that the Dallas PD had already begun crafting a narrative behind closed doors. The union was mobilizing. The DA's office was strategizing. Supervisors were coordinating language. The mayor's office was pressuring for stability. And in the background, the silent machinery of systemic protection was warming up, preparing to shield Cole Matthews the way it had dozens of times before. It didn't matter that Marcus was innocent. It didn't matter that evidence had been planted. It didn't matter that a grandmother had caught it on video. The system didn't rush to find truth. It rushed to preserve itself. But something had shifted. Something small. Something fragile but real. Evelyn Brooks had spoken up. Alicia Gomez had taken the case. Captain Harris had felt the crack in his conscience widen. And Marcus, despite the bruises, despite the fear, despite the humiliation, refused to crumble. He sat there in that holding cell, back straight, breath steady, eyes clear, embodying a quiet truth. Injustice thrives on silence, but it trembles in the presence of dignity. When truth enters the courtroom, the Dallas Federal Courthouse rose like a monument to justice, its limestone columns and towering steps projecting authority, stability, and order. But inside, the air felt brittle, pulled too tight, stretched like a string, begging to snap. News vans lined the street outside. Reporters huddled with steaming coffee cups, reviewing notes. The arrest of a renowned neurosurgeon was already headline material, but whispers of misconduct, of a questionable officer, had turned the story into something volatile, and everyone inside the courthouse could feel it. Marcus Reed walked in wearing the same clothes from the night of his arrest. Rumpled, bruised, but holding himself with the quiet dignity of a man who knew that truth, though endangered, was still alive. Even in handcuffs, he stood straighter than the officers escorting him. In the lobby, Naomi Reed waited with attorney Alicia Gomez. Naomi's posture was rigid, but her eyes softened the moment she saw him. She reached for his hand, only to remember it was cuffed. The realization tightened her throat. "We'll fight this," she whispered, voice trembling with fury and love. "Mrs. Brooks contacted me. She has everything on video." Marcus nodded once, barely noticeable, steady. "This is just another mission," he murmured, though it was really for her, not himself. They entered courtroom 5A. Judge Linda Harper, known for rulings that almost always favored law enforcement, presided from the bench with a practiced neutrality that barely concealed her predispositions. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, police officers, ordinary citizens, and spectators who had come after hearing rumors of a grandmother's video that might overturn everything. Silence fell as the clerk spoke. Bail hearing for State versus Marcus Reed. Charges: possession of a controlled substance and resisting arrest. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Kyle Danner, stood with a stiff, polished confidence. "Your Honor, the state requests bail be set at $75,000. The defendant displayed signs of aggression during the arrest and could pose a flight risk." Alicia rose, outrage hidden beneath her professional calm. "Your Honor, Dr. Reed is a neurosurgeon with no criminal record, deep ties to this community, and a life built entirely on service. We request release on his own recognizance." Judge Harper's gaze flicked between them before landing on the one man who seemed certain of his power. "Officer Matthews, take the stand." Cole Matthews approached with the swagger of someone who believed the courtroom belonged to him. His uniform was crisp. His expression was solemn. His lies are already composed. He began, "Dr. Reed was speeding through a residential neighborhood. When I pulled him over, he acted belligerently, refused commands, and appeared to be reaching for a weapon." Naomi's lips parted in disbelief. Alicia's pen froze mid-note. Reporters murmured. Marcus merely sat still, breathing evenly as if listening to a bedtime story he had heard countless times, a story in which a black man must be rewritten into a threat to justify the actions against him. Cole continued smoothly. "I ordered him to exit the vehicle. He resisted. It required assistance from 2 additional officers to subdue him. He was lying with the ease of a man conditioned to expect agreement." Alicia stood for cross-examination. "Officer Matthews," she began, "you testified that you pulled Dr. Reed over for speeding, yet the citation you issued was for a broken taillight. Which was it?" Cole blinked, thrown off for half a second. "He was speeding, but I noticed the taillight once I approached." "And you have no radar reading?" "No." "Was a weapon found in the vehicle?" "No." "Did Dr. Reed ever make a threatening movement?" "Not that the camera angle showed, but—" "Thank you, Officer Matthews. No further questions." A tremor swept through the courtroom. Something was cracking, something long protected. Alicia turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, we request permission to call a witness who has video evidence contradicting Officer Matthews' testimony." Judge Harper stiffened. "This is a bail hearing, Ms. Gomez, not a trial." "Perjury by an officer is relevant at any stage," Alicia countered. "Mrs. Evelyn Brooks is present. She recorded the arrest." A wave of excitement tore through the spectators. Judge Harper hesitated, not because she sought fairness, but because the request threatened to destabilize the usual order of things. "Denied. The court will not review the video at this time." Naomi inhaled sharply, fury flashing in her eyes. Reporters scribbled faster. The system was circling its wagons. Minutes of silence. Before a storm. During the brief recess that followed, Marcus was escorted to a hallway just outside the courtroom. The moment the bailiff looked away, Cole stepped into the space between them. "You think you're smart, huh?" he hissed, eyes burning. "Trying to embarrass me, bringing witnesses, bringing lawyers." Marcus said nothing. Cole leaned closer, voice dripping venom. "You people need to learn your place. You walk around with your fancy degree, your big house, acting like you're better than us. But I know what you are." Marcus turned his head slowly, meeting Cole's eyes. There was no fear in his gaze, only clarity. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. Cole's lips curled. "Because I can." Those 3 words, simple, brutal, honest, carried the weight of centuries. The bailiff returned. The exchange ended. But something had shifted inside Marcus. He was no longer enduring injustice. He was witnessing its true face. Truth meets violence. When proceedings resumed, Judge Harper invited Marcus to speak on his own behalf. He rose slowly, hands cuffed, ribs aching. But his voice was steady. "Your Honor," he began, "I am a neurosurgeon who has served this community for years. I have never used illegal substances. I complied with every instruction Officer Matthews gave me. The events described here are fabricated." Cole stiffened. Marcus continued, each word measured like a surgeon navigating delicate tissue. "I performed a 14-hour brain surgery the same day. No one under the influence could do that. The charges against me defy logic, medical reality, and simple truth." He lifted his swollen wrists. "These injuries came from excessive force during handcuffing, not resistance." Then, like a blade sliding between ribs, he added, "And the timeline Officer Matthews described is medically impossible." The courtroom shifted. A ripple, a stir. Cole's face darkened. Red, then purple, then something ugly and unrestrained. Marcus went on. "Furthermore, Mrs. Brooks saw Officer Matthews plant a substance under my seat. She recorded it." Gasps. Cameras clicking. Reporters leaning forward. Cole exploded. "He's lying!" He shot up from his seat. "No one believes you, boy." And before anyone could react, before the bailiffs could intercept, before the judge could raise her voice. Cole crossed the room and drove his boot into Marcus Reed's ribs. The sound, God, the sound, echoed like the crack of a tree splitting in a storm. Marcus fell. The courtroom erupted into chaos. People screamed. Reporters lunged forward. Alicia ran to Marcus's side. Naomi cried out his name, her voice breaking into pieces. The bailiffs tackled Cole, who snarled and spit racial slurs as they pinned him. Judge Harper hammered her gavel wildly, her voice thin and powerless. Order! Order! But order had died the moment she permitted injustice to thrive in her courtroom. Alicia knelt beside Marcus, her hand trembling on his shoulder. Dr. Reed, Marcus, talk to me, she pleaded. He grimaced, breath shallow, but he lifted himself partially upright with her help. The courtroom watched, breathless. And then, stunningly, impossibly, Judge Harper turned to him. Dr. Reed, she said, what did you say to provoke Officer Matthews? Silence. A silence louder than the kick. A silence sharper than Cole's hatred. A silence that exposed the rot growing at the core of the system. Alicia rose slowly, fury radiating off her. Your Honor, she said, voice cutting through the chaos, my client was assaulted, while handcuffed, while in custody, while testifying, by the very officer who arrested him. And you are asking him what he did to provoke it? Her words struck like lightning. People nodded. Reporters scribbled. Even some officers looked stunned. In that moment, something shifted, not just in the room, but in the collective conscience of everyone watching. The truth was undeniable. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was the system protecting one of its own at the cost of an innocent man. And the country would soon know it. The seed of a larger reckoning. Marcus, still reeling from the impact, spoke softly. I told the truth. That was all. But truth, spoken aloud, became a spark. And sparks, when they fall into dry places, ignite. When power trembles, chaos churned in the courtroom long after Officer Cole Matthews was restrained and dragged from the scene, still cursing, still snarling, still convinced he would face no real consequences. Marcus Reed remained seated, breathing shallowly through the pain vibrating across his ribcage. Alicia hovered beside him, one hand on his back, her face tight with fury and fear. Naomi pressed closer, her touch trembling but determined, protective in the way only love can be. Judge Linda Harper looked overwhelmed, her facade of control smashed alongside the integrity of her courtroom. Reporters whispered rapidly, cameras clicked, and everywhere people were asking the same question. How could this happen in a courthouse? How could a police officer attack a defendant in full view of the law? But those who understood America's racial landscape knew the better question. How does it still happen? Alicia stepped forward, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client and request that Officer Matthews be taken into custody for assault, evidence tampering, and perjury. Judge Harper flinched as though struck. The room held its breath. This was a moment in which justice could reassert itself, or retreat. Harper opened her mouth to speak, but before she could voice whatever calculation her mind was preparing, a bailiff stepped forward, his face pale. Your Honor, there's an urgent call for you from the Chief Judge's office. They say it's a matter of national security. A collective gasp rippled through the room. National security? In a bail hearing for drug possession? Judge Harper's expression shifted from confusion to concern, then to something closer to fear. She nodded stiffly and excused herself from the bench, disappearing into her chambers. The moment her door closed, the courtroom erupted again. Reporters darted toward the exits to make calls. Officers huddled together, whispering. Naomi held Marcus's hand as gently as if it were fragile glass. Marcus, are you okay? She breathed. He nodded once, though pain radiated through every breath. Inside, he was thinking something else entirely. It has begun. The call that reaches the highest office. 1,000 miles away, deep inside the Pentagon, retired Admiral Benjamin Langford stood in front of a secure phone line. His jaw was locked in a way that suggested both urgency and anger. When Commander Isaiah Walker, Marcus's former teammate and closest friend in the Navy, had recognized Marcus's mugshot on the news the night before. He had called Langford immediately. "Sir, that's Reed. It's Marcus." Langford had stared at the photo for a long, heavy moment. A decorated SEAL, a Medal of Honor recipient, a man whose classified service had shaped international operations, and now arrested on drug charges, assaulted in court, inside a system that didn't even know who he was? Unacceptable. "Get me the Attorney General," Langford had said. "Now." Now the line clicked. Judge Harper's voice came through, thin and shaking. "Admiral Langford, this is Judge Harper." Langford didn't waste time. "Judge, I have the Attorney General with me. We've reviewed the situation involving Dr. Marcus Reed. I'm calling to inform you that your defendant is not simply a neurosurgeon." Judge Harper swallowed audibly. Who is he?" Langford's voice softened, not with gentleness, but with reverence. "He is Commander Marcus Elijah Reed, United States Navy, formerly of SEAL Team 6. His full record is classified at the highest levels of national security." The judge's breath caught. Langford continued. "He is a Medal of Honor recipient. He has led missions that protected this nation in ways you will never be allowed to read. And as of this morning, the Department of Defense considers his case a matter of federal concern." The judge sat down slowly, her gavel hand trembling. "We will be sending Commander Michael Hayes, U.S. Navy JAG Corps, to your courthouse momentarily. He is on a military helicopter en route." "A helicopter?" she whispered, stunned. "Yes, Judge. And in the meantime, you are strongly advised to ensure no further harm comes to Commander Reed." "This is..." Judge Harper exhaled shakily. "I had no idea. Most people don't. That's why his identity is classified." Then Langford added, with just enough edge to remind her of her duty, "Do not fail him again." The line clicked. Judge Harper sat in silence, the weight of her previous decisions crashing over her like a tidal wave. A courtroom transformed. When Judge Harper returned to the courtroom, the change in her demeanor was unmistakable. Her face was pale, her steps stiff, her authority was shaken. "This court is in recess for 30 minutes, she announced. Her voice faltered slightly. "Officer Matthews will remain in custody of the bailiffs until further notice." People in the gallery exchanged bewildered looks. Why the sudden shift? What had she learned? What could possibly change the tone of a bail hearing so dramatically? Outside, the first thrumming sound of rotor blades approached. A military helicopter landed in a nearby park, sending dust swirling. Spectators rushed to the windows. Reporters sprinted outside. Cameras swung toward the unexpected arrival. Moments later, a man in a full Navy dress uniform entered the courthouse, flanked by federal agents. His briefcase, secured with handcuffs to his wrist, bore the metallic insignia of the Office of Naval Intelligence. Every head turned as he walked into courtroom 5A and took a seat between the prosecution and defense. Judge Harper called the court back into session. Her voice now carried a tone the courtroom hadn't heard before. Respect, restraint, maybe even fear. "In light of new information," she said carefully, "the court will proceed differently than planned." She invited Alicia Gomez, ADA Kyle Danner, and the Navy commander to her bench. Soft whispers filled the room. Who is that man? Why is the Navy here? What did the judge learn? From the bench, Alicia could see the moment Ada Danner's face drained of color. As the Navy commander opened the briefcase and presented documentation, Danner stepped back, shaking his head. "This can't be..." He cut himself off. Judge Harper nodded once, then returned to her seat. Her voice, now steady, echoed through the room. "Bailiffs place Officer Cole Matthews under arrest for assault, evidence tampering, filing false reports, and violation of civil rights." A collective gasp burst through the courtroom. Cole, shocked and furious, struggled against the bailiffs. "You can't do this. Do you know who my family is?" But his protests were swallowed by the sound of handcuffs snapping around his wrists, the same way he had tightened them around Marcus's the night before. Justice, for once, had turned around. "And furthermore," Judge Harper continued, "all charges against Dr. Marcus Reed are dismissed with prejudice. Dr. Reed, you are free to go. The court extends its deepest apologies for your treatment." A roar of disbelief swept the room. Reporters raced out to break the story. Naomi covered her mouth with shaking hands. Alicia blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal. Marcus remained still, processing the shift from humiliation to vindication in a span of minutes. The Navy commander approached him with a respectful bow of the head. "Commander Reed," he said softly, carefully using the title the courtroom still didn't understand, "Admiral Langford sends his apologies for the delay in our intervention." Naomi's eyes widened. Alicia's breath caught. Marcus nodded slightly, his military composure sliding back into place like a forgotten piece of armor. "Thank you," he murmured. The collapse of a false narrative. As Marcus walked out of the courtroom, finally free, the media swarmed. "Dr. Reed, why did the military intervene? Were you really Navy Special Forces? What is your relationship with the Pentagon? Are you the Medal of Honor recipient from the classified ceremony 5 years ago?" He gave them a single phrase, practiced and precise. No comment. But then a reporter from the Dallas Morning Herald called out, "Dr. Reed, is it true you once served in SEAL Team 6? Marcus paused. Not long, just enough. And in that single heartbeat of hesitation, every camera caught the truth. Because silence can be an answer. Because dignity can reveal more than words. Because the world suddenly realized the man they had seen beaten in a courtroom was one of the nation's greatest quiet heroes. And the injustice done to him was not just personal, it was national. A moral shift begins. As Marcus left the courthouse hand in hand with Naomi, he felt something he had not felt since the night of his arrest. Air in his lungs, room to breathe, space to stand tall again. He looked back at the courthouse, the place where he had been broken and vindicated in the same morning, and whispered a truth that only he could fully understand. "This wasn't just for me," he said softly. "This was for every person the system tried to silence." Naomi squeezed his hand. They walked on, knowing the real battle was only beginning. The country wakes up by nightfall. The story had erupted across the nation like a controlled detonation. Precise, devastating, impossible to ignore. Every news outlet ran the headline in some form. Black neurosurgeon revealed as decorated Navy SEAL after police assault. Pentagon intervenes in local arrest. Officer accused of evidence tampering. Courtroom violence caught on camera sparks national outrage. Cable networks ran the footage on loop. Marcus walked into the courtroom with dignity. Officer Cole Matthews launched his boot into Marcus's ribs. The chaos that followed. Matthews being dragged away in cuffs. A military helicopter landing outside a courthouse like something out of a movie. America watched the assault again and again, unable to deny what they saw. For once, the narrative couldn't be twisted, couldn't be blurred, couldn't be explained away. Truth had been recorded, and truth had teeth. The media splits along familiar lines. Some outlets frame Marcus as a hero betrayed by the system. War hero assaulted by rogue cop. How did this happen? A doctor, a veteran, a black man, a victim of racism. Others tried desperately to avoid acknowledging race. Medal of Honor recipient wronged by lone bad officer. Is this a failure of training or oversight? But the country saw through it. People recognized the tension beneath the surface. The truth too large to hide. Marcus wasn't saved because the system worked. He was saved because someone powerful knew his name. And that truth shook America to its core. Investigative journalism goes to work. Within 24 hours, investigative reporters had unearthed Officer Matthews' history. 7 previous complaints of racial profiling. Multiple allegations of excessive force. Dozens of suspicious traffic stops involving black drivers. Posts in private social media groups filled with racist memes. None of it had resulted in discipline. None. Because Matthews had connections. Deep ones inside the department. His uncle, Deputy Commissioner Richard Matthews, had quietly buried every complaint. The system had wrapped itself around him like armor. And America was furious. "This isn't one bad cop," one reporter said on air. "This is a system designed to protect bad cops." Protests erupted in Dallas, then spread to Houston, Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. The chant rose like a tide. "Justice for Marcus! Justice for all!" Hand-painted signs filled the streets. "Stop protecting racist cops, reform. APD, now silence is complicity. Black lives deserve safety. Even political leaders who normally avoided strong statements about policing felt compelled to speak. Voices of the people. Perhaps the most unexpected voice came from 70-year-old Evelyn Brooks, the woman whose video exposed everything. Interviewed on national television, she said, "I've lived long enough to know what injustice looks like. I've seen it dressed in uniforms and suits and badges. But I also know this. When ordinary people speak up, darkness loses its power." Her courage, the courage to simply press record, became a symbol of resistance. Millions shared her interview with captions like, "Be an Evelyn Brooks. Record everything. One voice can shake a nation." Inside the police department, cracks form. Captain David Harris sat in his office, watching the news reports unravel the department's secrecy thread by thread. He had served the force for over 2 decades. He had believed in reform, in accountability, in the possibility of justice. But now he saw his department through the eyes of the public, a fortress of silence, a culture of protection, a machine that devoured truth to preserve its power. He saw what he had been part of, what he had allowed, what he had ignored because it was easier, and guilt sat heavy on his chest. His phone buzzer. A text from an FBI agent he'd met previously on a community outreach project. "Captain Harris, we need to talk. Off the record. Tonight?" Harris stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed, "I'll be there." He felt the shift inside himself, a man deciding finally which side of history he wanted to stand on. Officer Sofia Martinez finds her courage elsewhere in the department. Officer Sofia Martinez sat alone in the women's locker room. She had been one of the officers present during Marcus's arrest. She had seen the missteps, the fabricated narrative, the escalating aggression. She had felt deep in her stomach that something was wrong, but she had not spoken, because speaking meant isolation, retaliation, vandalized lockers, no backup on dangerous calls, career suicide. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw, guilt woven into every line of her face. "I should have said something," she whispered. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from Internal Affairs requesting her testimony. Her hands trembled. But then she remembered Marcus standing in that courtroom, dignified even as pain rippled across his body. She remembered Mrs. Brooks's recording despite fear. She remembered Naomi's voice shaking as she cried her husband's name. She remembered the look in Cole Matthews' eyes, the hatred, the certainty of impunity. Sophia inhaled and clicked, reply. "I will cooperate fully." The decision terrified her, but it also freed her, because silence had a cost, and she was done paying it. The union tries to backtrack. The Dallas Police Union held a press conference to try to control the narrative. Initially, they attempted their usual defense. "We stand by our officers until proven otherwise." But within hours, as evidence mounted, the union abruptly shifted. "We support due process. Officer Matthews will not receive union representation going forward." Reporters erupted with questions. "Are you distancing yourselves because of public pressure? How many complaints did the union previously block? Why was Officer Matthews protected for so long?" The union president stumbled, sweated, avoided eye contact. The country knew the answer, because protecting officers, especially the wrong ones, was built into the system, and now that system was cracking. Judge Harper faces her own reckoning. When Judge Linda Harper reviewed the headlines the next day, her stomach twisted. One news outlet had published a comparison of her rulings through the years. Cases where police testimony contradicted black defendants. 96% of rulings favored police. Commentators called for an investigation into judicial bias. Twitter demanded her removal. Protests formed outside the courthouse with signs reading, "Judges must protect justice, not police lies." Her clerk entered nervously. "Judge Harper, the Judicial Review Commission has requested your case files." Her hands trembled. "Which cases?" "All of them, ma'am." She felt the world closing in, not unfairly, but rightfully. She had enabled a culture of deference to police, even when it undermined justice. She had failed her bench, She had failed her oath. She had failed Marcus Reed. Consequences were no longer avoidable. The district attorney scrambles District Attorney Elaine Porter, who had originally approved the charges against Marcus without questioning the inconsistencies, now faced her own crisis. Her opponent in the upcoming election called a press conference demanding her resignation. Porter tried to pivot. "We will conduct a full review of all cases involving Officer Matthews." But the public saw through it. She hadn't acted out of moral conviction. She acted out of political survival. And in a shifting America, one that was tired of injustice, survival no longer guaranteed victory. The FBI steps in that evening. In a dim corner booth of a quiet cafe, Captain Harris slid a thumb drive across the table to Special Agent Diana Cooper. "This contains the complaints that never made it into Officer Matthews' official record," he said, voice low. "Internal communications, emails, orders from the Deputy Commissioner to bury anything that could harm Matthews' career." Agent Cooper nodded, placing the drive carefully into a secure case. "Captain, you understand that by giving us this, you're blowing the whistle on your own leadership?" Harris nodded slowly. "I know," he whispered, "but people like Dr. Reed shouldn't need the Pentagon to save them. The system should be enough." His voice cracked on the last word. "Should be," Cooper said gently. "But right now, it isn't." Harris exhaled deeply. "Then let's fix it." For the first time in a long time, he felt like a cop again. Not a cog in a broken machine, but a man choosing justice. A nation reflects. Across the country, people debated, how many officers like Matthews are out there? How many innocent men never get a helicopter landing for them? What if Dr. Reed hadn't been a war hero? What if he were just an ordinary black man? One commentator said it best. Marcus Reed didn't survive because the system worked. He survived because the system was forced, externally, to acknowledge his humanity. And that truth haunted millions. Marcus watches the storm from home. Back in Highland Park, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed while Naomi gently examined his ribs. "Bruised but not broken," she whispered, her fingers careful, loving. Marcus exhaled, pain flickering through him. "Old habits," he murmured. "I turned with the impact." Naomi looked into his eyes. "They're going to dig now," she said quietly. "Into your past, into your service." Marcus nodded. "It was always a possibility. Admiral Langford will control what gets released." Then a deeper worry surfaced, one that had lived inside him since the night of the arrest. "My story isn't the point," he whispered. Naomi squeezed his hand. "I know." Marcus closed his eyes. "It's about every man who doesn't wear a uniform, every man who doesn't have a classified record, every black man who gets stopped and doesn't get a Navy commander to walk into his courtroom." His voice cracked softly. "They deserve protection too." Naomi touched his cheek gently. "And maybe now, because of what happened, because it was you, the country will finally listen." Marcus hoped she was right, because the pain he had endured, physical, emotional, spiritual, would mean little if it didn't lead to something larger, something human, something just, something transformative. The trial of Cole Matthews. 7 weeks after the assault in the courtroom, the Dallas Federal Courthouse felt strangely heavier, as if the walls themselves understood the significance of what was about to unfold. United States versus Cole Matthews. A case that would test not only one officer's guilt, but the integrity of an entire system. Security was tight. U.S. Marshals lined the hallways. Reporters filled the sidewalks. Protesters stood behind barriers holding signs demanding justice. Not just for Marcus Reed, but for every life twisted by misconduct swept under bureaucratic rugs. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with a tense, electric hush. At the defense table sat Officer Cole Matthews, no longer in uniform. His face had changed. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the smirk of entitlement. He looked older, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a man clutching the fraying edges of a narrative that had protected him his entire career. Nearby, his new private attorneys whispered strategy, though the exhaustion in their eyes revealed that they too understood the tide was shifting against them. Across from them sat U.S. Attorney Caroline Mitchell, her files meticulously organized, her posture steady. She wasn't here to win a case, She was here to speak for the Constitution itself. Behind her sat FBI analysts, internal affairs investigators, forensic technicians, and experts from agencies as far as D.C. It wasn't just a prosecution. It was a coalition. The opening salvos, Mitchell rose first. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust. The trust we place in those who carry badges. The trust we expect from institutions meant to protect us. Officer Cole Matthews violated that trust, deliberately, repeatedly, and without remorse. She walked toward the jury box. You will see video evidence. You will hear testimony. You will learn that Officer Matthews did not make a mistake. He followed a pattern of targeting black citizens, especially those who dared to succeed. She paused. And when he realized that Dr. Marcus Reed couldn't be broken with intimidation, he tried to break him with lies. Silence thickened in the room. The defense attempted their narrative next. Officer Matthews is a dedicated officer who made decisions in the heat of the moment. Dr. Reed, trained in combat with a classified military background, presented unknown risks. My client acted out of caution, not malice. But the words fell flat. The nation had seen the footage, and the truth, once revealed, cannot be persuaded back into darkness. The evidence speaks first. The prosecution began with the body camera footage, enhanced frame by FBI technicians. The courtroom watched in rapt attention as the slowed video captured. Matthews glancing over his shoulder, his hand slipping into his own pocket. The small plastic bag appeared between his fingers, the precise motion as he tucked it beneath the driver's seat. A ripple traveled through the room, horror mixed with disgust. The FBI analyst explained, "We tracked the origin of the fingerprints on the bag. Officer Matthews' DNA was present. Dr. Reed's was not. This was planted evidence." Even Matthews' own attorneys stiffened at the confirmation. A parade of witnesses, each more damning than the last former colleagues. Officer Kevin Rodriguez took the stand, his voice steady but heavy. "I heard Matthews refer to black neighborhoods as open hunting grounds. He joked about pulling over people who got too comfortable driving nice cars." The jurors looked ill. Rodriguez continued, "Reporting him went nowhere. Everyone knew his uncle would shut the complaint down." Then came Sergeant Amy Peterson, who described Matthews' resentment toward minority drivers in affluent areas. He said they didn't belong there, that he was teaching them their place. Her testimony struck the room like cold water. Captain Harris, the whistleblower. Captain Harris, visibly worn but resolute, approached the stand next. He identified internal memos, emails, suppressed reports, a pattern of protection orchestrated by Deputy Commissioner Richard Matthews. "There was an unspoken rule," Harris said softly. "You didn't mess with Officer Matthews. His uncle made that clear." He pointed at the stack of documents. "These are records of complaints that never made it into the official system. 11 incidents alone were buried intentionally." Harris paused, eyes briefly meeting Marcus across the room. "I failed to challenge it. For that, I am deeply sorry." It was the first apology Marcus had ever received from the system that harmed him. Officer Sophia Martinez, breaking the blue wall. Sophia Martinez stepped forward, shoulders tense but chin high. She described the night of the arrest. Dr. Reed complied with every instruction, everyone. There was no aggression, no resistance. The escalation came entirely from Officer Matthews. She swallowed hard. "I didn't speak up at first. I was afraid of retaliation, but silence only protects the wrong people." The courtroom was silent. Her bravery broke through years of culture built on fear. Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, the citizen who saved the truth. The elderly woman walked slowly to the stand, but her voice rang brave and strong. "I've watched injustice my whole life," she said, "but that night, I saw a man being framed right in front of me. I recorded it because someone had to tell the truth." Her video, authenticated by experts, rolled on screens once again. The planting, the lie, the assault in the courtroom. No one dared breathe until the screen went dark. Then came Matthews, a tactical disaster. Against advice, Matthews insisted on testifying. He looked the jurors in the eyes that had already watched the footage and heard the evidence. and he tried to convince them he had feared for his safety. He glared at me, Matthews insisted. His tone was hostile. I thought he might attack. Mitchell approached slowly, like a surgeon preparing a scalpel. You claim you feared Dr. Reed, she said calmly. Yes. You feared a man with his hands visible at all times? Yes. You feared a man who never raised his voice? Yes. Mitchell's voice sharpened. Or did you fear his success, his dignity, his existence in a neighborhood you didn't think he belonged in? Matthews stiffened. That's not... He was... Mitchell cut him off. You texted another officer earlier that day. Let's go hunting in Highland Park. These rich ones think they're untouchable. Were you referring to Dr. Reed? Matthews' face flushed. He had no answer, because his truth had already been spoken, by his own hand. Marcus takes the stand. The heart of the trial. When Marcus walked to the witness stand, the room went silent. He didn't wear his Navy medals. He didn't mention his rank. He didn't reveal his battle scars. He spoke only as a man who had lived through humiliation and survived with dignity. His voice remained calm, but the tremor beneath it carried the weight of centuries. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist. I didn't do anything except exist in a black body, in the wrong place at the wrong time. He looked at the jurors, not accusingly, but honestly. My military service shouldn't have mattered. My education shouldn't have mattered. My profession shouldn't have mattered. Being human should have been enough. A juror wiped tears. Another looked away, overwhelmed. Marcus continued. For me, the Pentagon intervened. But what about the others? The ones without titles, without resources, without someone powerful to call? His eyes softened. I survived because someone recorded the truth, but truth should not rely on luck. Justice should not depend on who you are. When he finished, even the judge appeared shaken. The verdict. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood, hands trembling slightly. We find the defendant, Cole Matthews, guilty on all counts. A breath Marcus hadn't known he'd been holding finally left his lungs. Matthews collapsed into his chair, disbelief twisting his features. Disbelief that the system he counted on had finally rejected him. Sentencing, a statement to the nation. 2 weeks later, Judge Ortiz delivered the sentence. 15 years in federal prison, one of the harshest penalties ever handed down for a civil rights violation by a police officer. His statement was searing. Mr. Matthews, you wore a badge that symbolized trust. You used it as a weapon. You disgraced your oath. And you harmed not just one man, but the fabric of justice itself. The courtroom was silent except for quiet sobs. Some were tears of relief. Some were tears of vindication. Some were tears for the transformation long overdue. Marcus did not celebrate. He simply nodded, his dignity intact, his heart heavy yet hopeful. Because this moment wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring something broken. And as Matthews was led away in handcuffs, this time with no favoritism, no protection, no excuses, the world understood. The system had finally looked at itself. And for once, it did not look away. The Washington Justice Initiative. 6 months after the trial of Officer Cole Matthews, the city of Dallas looked different. Not cleaner, not quieter, but awake. The cherry blossoms lining City Hall Plaza were in full bloom, pink petals drifting through warm spring air as if nature itself was blessing the renewal happening inside the walls of the justice system. On a raised platform stood Dr. Marcus Reed, dressed in a simple suit, no medals, no military insignia, just a man who had walked through fire and chosen to come out carrying water for others. Behind him sat the people who had helped turn tragedy into transformation. Attorney Sarah Kim, now head of a major civil rights division. Evelyn Brooks, the woman whose phone had changed history. Interim Police Chief Rebecca Johnson, the first leader in decades openly committed to transparency. Captain David Harris, now a national consultant on police accountability. Officer Sophia Martinez, promoted after helping dismantle a culture of silence. And in the front row, holding her husband's hand, sat Naomi Reed, her eyes bright with pride and a quiet ache. The crowd, thousands of people from all races, ages, and neighborhoods, waited breathlessly as Marcus began to speak. A new beginning. This foundation, Marcus said, his voice calm yet resonant, is not about punishment. It's about healing. The wind rippled gently through the crowd. It's about healing individuals who have suffered injustice and healing a system that must confront its own reflection. He paused, looking at the faces before him, not just supporters, but survivors. The man who had lost a son to a wrongful stop, the woman whose brother had been beaten during a misidentified arrest, young activists fighting for safer streets, retired officers demanding integrity return to their badge. Marcus continued, "As a surgeon, I know that wounds don't heal by covering them. They heal by cleaning them, painfully, honestly, fearlessly. Our justice system must do the same." The crowd murmured in agreement, a wave of emotion rolling through them. The initiative's impact. The Washington Justice Initiative, funded through the city's settlement and donations from across the nation, had already taken on 34 cases across 3 states, victims of racial profiling, falsified reports, and police retaliation. But that was only the beginning. Chief Johnson had implemented historic reforms. A new early warning algorithm to identify officers with troubling patterns, mandatory body cams with automatic upload and criminal penalties for tampering, civilian oversight board with real disciplinary power, training programs on de-escalation, empathy, and implicit bias, transparent reporting of stops, searches, and use of force incidents. For the first time in decades, Dallas was becoming a model for national reform. Even officers who had once resisted the changes now admitted the new culture made them safer, more supported, more respected by the community. And internal affairs, now led by Captain Sofia Martinez, became a symbol of the city's rebirth. Where fear once lived, accountability now stood. Those who enabled harm-faced justice reform didn't stop with Cole Matthews. Deputy Commissioner Richard Matthews, who buried complaints for years, was forced to resign under public pressure after internal emails surfaced showing his active role in shielding his nephew. Judge Linda Harper, whose rulings disproportionately favored police over black defendants, was removed from the bench following a judicial review. District Attorney Elaine Porter lost her re-election bid to a reform-driven candidate who campaigned on justice, not conviction rates. For years, these individuals had held power without scrutiny. Now their consequences became a stark reminder of a simple truth. Injustice thrives in silence. Justice thrives in sunlight. The country learns the man behind the name for months. Marcus had avoided interviews, avoided attention, avoided being turned into a symbol, but change required transparency, required vulnerability, required truth. So eventually he sat down for one exclusive interview, not to recount his suffering, but to teach. "My military service," he said during the broadcast, "was never meant to make me more deserving of justice than anyone else. The goal is not to elevate me, it is to uplift those whose voices go unheard." The country listened, and slowly the narrative shifted, from Marcus the victim to Marcus the catalyst. A personal transformation. The Reed family grows in Shawshank in July. Naomi stood in their living room, her hand resting on her growing belly. "A girl," she said softly, smiling. Marcus's eyes warmed. "A girl named Hope." Hope, a word that carried the weight of generations, a word that felt earned because blood, sweat, pain, and resilience had carved a path for it. Marcus bent to kiss Naomi's belly and whispered, "You will grow up in a better America, not because change came on its own, but because good people demanded it." The Academy speech. A circle comes. Full 6 months after Matthew's sentencing, Marcus walked onto the stage of the newly reformed Dallas Police Academy. 200 recruits sat before him, black, white, Latino, Asian, men and women who represented the America that could be. He saw nervousness in their eyes. He saw hope too, and he saw the weight of responsibility pressing against their young shoulders. He spoke with the quiet authority of a man who had worn 2 uniforms, one of war and one of healing. "In the Navy SEAL," he began, "I live by a code: honor, courage, commitment." He looked around the room. "Those words mean nothing if they don't show up when no one is watching. Your badge is not a shield to hide behind. It is a promise. He let the silence breathe. A promise that you will protect, not harm, serve, not dominate, see humanity, not stereotypes. Some recruits wiped tears. Others swallowed hard, visibly absorbing the magnitude of his words. Then Marcus said something no one expected. Years ago, I led a classified operation to rescue American hostages. He paused. One of those hostages was a 19-year-old humanitarian volunteer named Michael Harper. The room stilled. Michael Harper is the son of Judge Linda Harper, the same judge who presided over my bail hearing and failed to protect my rights. Gasps echoed softly. Marcus continued gently. She didn't know. She couldn't know. But I knew. A hush fell. And that taught me something essential. We are all connected in ways we can't always see. We are capable of being victims and heroes, of harming and helping, of failing and rising. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. The question is not whether injustice exists. We know it does. The question is, who will you become in the moments that matter? Will you have the courage to do what's right, even when doing nothing is easier? The audience rose in a standing ovation. The final lesson, a call to America. As the applause faded, Marcus delivered his most powerful message, one meant not only for the recruits, but for the entire nation. We build a stronger America by seeing each other, by loving each other, by helping each other, by refusing to let fear or hatred dictate our actions. He placed a hand over his heart. No reform, no policy, no system can fix what people refuse to confront. Change begins inside us. In our willingness to look at our biases, our silence, our complicity, and say, "This ends with me." The room was silent, transformed, awakened, because they knew they weren't just watching a speech, they were witnessing the birth of a movement. Legacy of a man who chose love over anger. As Marcus exited the auditorium, a young recruit approached him. "Sir," the recruit said softly, "you changed the way I see this job. Thank you." Marcus smiled. "No," he replied. "Thank you for being willing to do it the right way." He walked outside into the sunlight where Naomi waited, one hand on her belly, her smile full of the joy and pain of their journey. They embraced. Around them, cherry blossoms drifted through the air like blessings, gentle reminders that beauty can grow, even in the shadow of suffering. This was the lesson of Marcus Reed. A single moment of injustice had led to a national reckoning. A single act of courage had exposed a corrupt system. A single ordinary citizen had captured the truth on camera. A single police officer had chosen integrity over silence. A single survivor had chosen compassion over vengeance. A single story had forced a nation to look inward. This is how change begins, with people, with courage, with love. And as Marcus looked out over the city he had nearly been destroyed by, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Pride, not for himself, but for what America could become when its people refused to give up on hope. When we look back at Dr. Marcus Reed's journey, we don't just see a man who survived injustice. We see a man who transformed it. We see a system that expected him to break, and instead watched him rise. We see everyday people, a neighbor with a phone, an officer with a conscience, a captain tired of silence, choosing courage over comfort. And we see the undeniable truth. Racism is not defeated by one law, one verdict, or one hero. It is defeated when people choose to stand up for one another, even when the world tells them to sit down. Marcus's story reminds us that love is not weakness. Accountability is not hostility. Justice is not optional. Most importantly, it teaches us that we build a stronger America, not by turning away from pain, but by turning toward each other, with compassion, with understanding, with the willingness to say, your life matters, your dignity matters, your future matters, and I will stand with you. If we carry that lesson into our homes, our streets, our workplaces, our police departments, and our courts, then America doesn't just change. America heals. And that healing begins with us, with you, with every person watching right now who believes in a country worthy of every child born into it. So if this story moved you, if it opened your eyes, if it reminded you why these conversations matter. Subscribe to the Racist Reality channel right now. Join a community committed to truth, justice, and human dignity. Visit our channel for more stories that expose injustice and inspire unity. Together, we can build an America where stories like Marcus Reed's don't repeat because we chose love over hate, courage over silence, and humanity over fear. Thank you for watching, and thank you for choosing to be part of the change.